Sarah's vision blurred as poison scorched through her veins, but the shadow that blocked out the moon was impossibly large, and getting closer. She tried to scream. Nothing came out but a wheeze that tasted like copper and ash. This is how I die, she thought, 22 years old and still waiting for a life that would never come. Poisoned at my first gathering by a man in a $5,000 suit. The shadow moved. Sarah's eyes wouldn't focus anymore, but she could make out the shape, massive shoulders, a frame that seemed carved from the mountain itself. The forest spun around her, and she wasn't sure if the growl she heard was real or just her Omega instincts howling their last warning. Then the shadow knelt, and the moon caught his face. Sarah stopped breathing for reasons that had nothing to do with the wolfsbane eating through her organs. 6 hours earlier, Sarah had stood in front of the mirror in her cramped bedroom, hands shaking as she fastened the clasp of her only good dress. "You look like you're trying too hard," her stepmother said from the doorway. Sarah's fingers stilled. "I thought. Don't think. That's always been your problem." Margaret crossed her arms, her beta sense sharp with disapproval. "The gathering isn't for Omegas like you. You're there as a formality, nothing more. Stay in the background. Don't talk to alphas above your station. And for the love of the moon, don't embarrass this family." This family. As if Sarah belonged to them. As if her father's death 5 years ago hadn't turned her into little more than a servant in her own home. "Yes, ma'am," Sarah whispered. Margaret's expression softened slightly, or maybe Sarah just imagined it. The Willowbrook pack already has a reputation for being small and weak. We can't afford any more shame. Do you understand? Sarah understood perfectly. She was the shame Margaret referred to. An unmated Omega at 22, plain-faced and too quiet, with none of the beauty or charm that made other Omegas desirable. Even her scent was unremarkable, rain and chamomile, her father used to say, but Margaret called it disappointment and missed opportunities. The gathering took place in a massive clearing owned by no single pack, neutral ground where wolves from 100 territories came together under the full moon. Sarah had never seen so many people in her life. Alphas stood in clusters, their power rolling off them in waves that made her Omega instincts curl tight in her chest. Betas moved through the crowd with easy confidence. And the Omegas, God, the other Omegas were nothing like her. They wore silk and confidence, their laughs bright and practiced, their scents designed to attract. Sarah kept to the edges like Margaret had instructed, nursing a glass of champagne she was too nervous to drink. That's when she saw him. Councilman Vero cut through the crowd like a knife, his perfectly styled hair and tailored suit announcing his importance before he ever opened his mouth. Betas whispered as he passed. He was one of the youngest council members in history, they said. Destined for great things. Rumored to be considering several Omega matches from prominent families. Sarah stepped back to give him space, and collided with a server carrying a tray of wine. Time slowed in the horrible way it does during disasters. The tray tilted. 3 glasses of deep red wine arced through the air in perfect synchronization. And Councilman Vero, who had stopped to speak with an alpha delegate, turned at precisely the wrong moment. The wine hit him square in the chest. The clearing went silent. Sarah's mouth opened and closed like a fish drowning in air. I didn't mean. You stupid Omega. Vero's voice was ice. His eyes traveled over her cheap dress, her scuffed shoes, the complete absence of pack status in her posture. Do you have any idea what this suit costs? I'll pay for it, Sarah stammered, knowing she couldn't, knowing her entire year's worth of odd jobs wouldn't cover the sleeve. You'll pay for it. Vero smiled, and something in that smile made Sarah's Omega instinct scream. Yes. I suppose you will. He reached past her for a fresh glass of champagne from a passing server, his hands steady and controlled. Drink this. It'll calm your nerves. Sarah stared at the glass. Every instinct told her not to take it. But dozens of eyes watched, and Margaret's warning echoed in her head, don't embarrass this family, and refusing a council member's offer was the kind of insult that got Pax blacklisted. She took the glass. She drank. Vero's smile widened. There. That wasn't so hard, was it? The taste was wrong. Champagne and something else, something bitter that coated her tongue like oil. Sarah's stomach clenched. Thank you for your understanding, Councilman, she managed, and fled before he could see her hands start to shake. She made it to the forest before the first wave of pain hit. Wolfsbane. She knew the signs from her father's stories, the way it felt like swallowing broken glass, the cold fire that spread through your veins, the way your wolf retreated so deep you couldn't feel her anymore. For most wolves, wolfsbane caused temporary illness. Painful, humiliating, but survivable. But Sarah was an Omega. And Omega biology processed toxins differently, faster, harder. She collapsed against a tree, her legs giving out. She tried to shift, her wolf could fight the poison better than her human form, but nothing happened. The wolfsbane had already severed that connection. I'm going to die here, she thought with strange clarity. Alone in the woods because I spilled wine on a man's suit. The pain intensified. Sarah crawled deeper into the trees, some animal instinct driving her to find shelter even though she knew it wouldn't matter. Her vision narrowed to a tunnel. Her heartbeat sounded like thunder. That's when she smelled him. Alpha. The scent hit her like a physical force, pine and winter storms and something wild that made her Omega instinct surge despite the poison. It was overwhelming, primal, the kind of scent that belonged in fairy tales about the old packs, before civilization softened them. Sarah looked up through tears and failing vision. The shadow blocked out the moon. He was huge. Not just tall, huge, built on a scale that didn't seem possible for a human frame. Shoulders that could break doors. Hands that could palm her skull like a basketball. In the moonlight, his eyes caught silver, and Sarah's breath stopped. She knew those eyes. Every wolf knew those eyes. Cale Thornridge. The monster Alpha. Don't, she tried to say, but her throat closed around the word. Cale dropped to one knee beside her, and Sarah could see the conflict in his face. His jaw clenched. His hands hovered over her but didn't touch, and she understood why even through the haze of poison. Touching an unmated Omega without permission was forbidden. It didn't matter that she was dying. The law existed to protect Omegas from Alphas who couldn't control themselves. But Cale's eyes traveled over her, the silver veins spreading under her skin, the shallow breathing, the way her lips had started to turn blue. Wolfsbane, he said. His voice was deeper than thunder. How much? Sarah couldn't answer. Her body convulsed. Cale swore, a low, vicious sound, and made his choice. He bit his own wrist, deep enough that blood welled dark and fast. Then he grabbed Sarah's jaw with one massive hand and forced her mouth open. Forgive me, he said, and tilted his wrist over her lips. Alpha blood hit her tongue. Sarah's body went rigid. She'd heard the stories. Alpha blood could heal, could strengthen, could save a dying wolf if the Alpha was powerful enough. But those were fairy tales. Weren't they? Cale's blood tasted like lightning in winter and something ancient that had no name. It burned going down, a different burn than the poison, a burn that felt like life instead of death. Sarah felt her wolf surge, felt the connection snap back into place like a rubber band released. The wolfsbane didn't disappear. Alpha blood couldn't neutralize poison that fast, but it stopped spreading. Stopped killing her. Sarah gasped. The air that filled her lungs felt like the first breath after drowning. Cale pulled his wrist back, and Sarah saw the wound already closing. Alpha healing. But something else caught her attention, a mark spreading across his skin, silver and intricate as frost on glass. She looked down at her own wrist. The same mark glowed there, a mirror image. No, Cale breathed, and for the first time, Sarah heard fear in that massive voice. No, that's not. A bond mark. Partial, incomplete, but undeniably real. His blood in her system had created a connection between them, something that would take time to fade. If it faded at all. Sarah stared up at her savior. At the monster Alpha. At the wolf who'd killed his own kind in a dominance fight, who'd been exiled for being too dangerous, too powerful, too wrong. The stories flooded back. Cale Thornridge, who could crush an Alpha's skull with his bare hands. Cale Thornridge, who'd nearly destroyed the Capitol's arena during his rage. Cale Thornridge, the cautionary tale parents used to teach their children about control. The poison might have stopped spreading, but the terror blooming in Sarah's chest was just beginning. Her vision blurred again, shock this time, not poison, and the last thing she saw before darkness claimed her was Cale's silver eyes widening in something that looked almost like panic. Then she fainted into the arms of the monster. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 2. Sarah woke to the smell of pine and wood smoke, and for one blissful moment, she forgot everything. Then her wrist throbbed. She jerked upright, and the room spun. Not her cramped bedroom at Margaret's house. Not the medical tent at the gathering. This was somewhere else entirely. A cabin, all rough-hewn logs and simple furniture, with morning light streaming through windows that overlooked endless forest. And on her left wrist, silver as starlight, was a mark that hadn't been there before. The memories crashed back. The poison. The shadow. The monster Alpha forcing his blood into her mouth. Cale Thornridge. Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. She was in his home. She was marked with his bond. She was. The door opened. Sarah scrambled backward on the bed, tangling herself in blankets that smelled like winter storms. Cale stood in the doorway, and somehow he looked even larger in the daylight. He had to duck to fit through the frame. His shoulders nearly touched both sides. "You're awake," he said, and stopped. Just stopped, like he'd hit an invisible wall 3 feet into the room. "How do you feel?" Sarah's voice came out as a whisper. "What did you do to me?" Something flickered across his face, hurt, maybe, or resignation. "I saved your life. You marked me." She held up her wrist. The silver pattern looked like frost crystals, beautiful and damning. "You bonded with me." "A partial bond," Cale corrected, his voice carefully neutral. "My blood neutralized the wolfsbane. The mark is a side effect. It'll fade." "When?" "Next full moon. 3 weeks." He paused. "Maybe sooner." "Maybe?" Sarah's fear sharpened into something closer to panic. "You don't know?" "I've never done this before." Cale's jaw tightened. "I've never had to force my blood into a dying Omega and pray it worked. So no, I don't have all the answers you want." They stared at each other across the small room. Sarah's Omega instincts were doing something complicated and terrifying. They should be screaming at the presence of an Alpha, especially one with Cale's reputation. Instead, they were practically purring, recognizing the scent of his blood in her system, the connection between them. It made her feel sick. "I want to leave," she said. Cale nodded slowly. "I figured you would. Doors that way." He gestured behind him. "You're not a prisoner." Sarah didn't believe him. But she also didn't have any other options. She slid out of bed, still wearing her ruined gathering dress, she realized with a flash of embarrassment, and walked toward the door. Cale stepped aside, pressing himself against the wall to give her as much space as possible in the narrow hallway. Sarah could feel the heat radiating off him, could hear his heartbeat, steady and slow. Too slow for someone who just kidnapped an Omega. She made it to the front door. Opened it. Stepped onto the porch. The forest stretched out in every direction, dense and green and completely unfamiliar. No roads. No other cabins. Nothing but wilderness and the distant sound of a stream. Sarah took another step. Then another. Pain lanced through her chest. She gasped and grabbed the porch railing. It felt like someone had wrapped barbed wire around her ribs and pulled. Not physical pain exactly, but wrong enough that her body seized up in protest. "Stop," Cale said from the doorway, and the pain eased slightly. "Don't go any farther." Sarah turned on him, still gripping the railing. "What did you do?" "Nothing." "That's the bond." He looked uncomfortable, like this was his fault somehow. "Partial bonds create a temporary tether. You can't go more than half a mile from me without it hurting. Both of us." "Both?" Sarah noticed for the first time that Cale had gone pale, one hand pressed against his own chest. "Yeah. Both." He let out a careful breath as Sarah moved back toward the cabin. The pain faded completely once she crossed the threshold. "It's for protection, usually. Keeps the omega close to their alpha until the bond stabilizes." "I'm not your omega." "I know that." Cale's voice was rough. "Believe me, I know." Sarah wanted to scream. Or cry. Or both. Instead, she sank onto the porch steps and put her head in her hands. 3 weeks. She was stuck here for 3 weeks with a man who could kill her without trying. "I'll make you a deal," Cale said after a long moment. She looked up. He hadn't moved from the doorway, maintaining that careful distance. "Stay here until the bond fades. I'll teach you to defend yourself, basic combat, how to detect poison, how to read alpha dominance displays." His silver eyes met hers. "When the next full moon comes and the bond breaks, you can leave. I'll give you money for travel, references for work in another territory if you want them. You'll never have to see me again." "Why would you do that?" "Because someone tried to kill you at the gathering, and they're probably going to try again." Cale's expression darkened. "And because you have nowhere else to go." "Am I wrong?" He wasn't wrong. The truth of it made Sarah's throat tight. Margaret would be furious about the scene at the gathering, about whatever rumors were spreading. Going back meant punishment at best, exile at worst. "What do you want in return?" she asked, because nobody offered something for nothing. Not in her experience. "Nothing." Cale's voice was flat. "I want nothing from you except your agreement not to try escaping and hurting us both. Everything else, food, shelter, training, that's freely given." Sarah studied him. The story said Cale Thornridge was a monster, but monsters didn't make bargains. They took what they wanted. "Okay," she said finally. 3 weeks. Then I leave." Something that might have been relief crossed Cale's face. "Okay." The first 2 days passed in a strange, careful dance. Cale gave Sarah the cabin's only bedroom and slept in the barn. He cooked simple meals and left them on the table, never eating until she'd taken what she wanted. He answered her questions with gruff patience but never asked any of his own. And he never, ever touched her. Sarah found herself watching him when he didn't know she was looking. The way he moved with surprising grace for someone his size. The way he'd catch himself before his footsteps got too heavy, like he was constantly aware of the space he took up. The way he'd pause before entering a room, giving her time to prepare for his presence. On the 3rd morning, she woke to find her reading glasses, broken during her collapse in the forest, repaired and sitting on the nightstand. The repair job was meticulous, the tiny screws tightened perfectly, a crack in one lens somehow sealed. Sarah held them up to the light, something warm and complicated spreading through her chest. That afternoon, she found fresh wildflowers in a jar by her door. Purple and white, the kind that grew in high meadows. She didn't mention them, and neither did Cale, but the next morning there were new ones. "I don't understand you," she said on the 4th day, watching him chop wood outside. He'd removed his shirt, and Sarah tried not to stare at the landscape of scars across his back. Claw marks. Bite marks. The price of dominance fights won and lost. Cale's axe paused mid-swing. "What don't you understand?" "The stories say you killed an alpha in the capital. That you're too dangerous to be around other wolves." "The stories are true." He brought the axe down, splitting the log cleanly. I did kill an alpha. In a dominance fight I didn't want, against an alpha who wouldn't back down. I was 19. I didn't know my own strength yet. But you're... Sarah struggled for words. You're not like that. Here. With me. Cale set down the axe and finally looked at her. I learned control after that. Spent 5 years learning to be gentle. To be small, as much as someone like me can be. His laugh was bitter. Doesn't change what I am. What I'm capable of. You're right to be afraid. I'm not afraid, Sarah said, and realized it was true. The terror from that first night had faded into something else. Wariness, maybe. Caution. But not fear. Not anymore. Cale's expression did something complicated. Then he turned back to his wood, and the conversation was over. That night, the heat symptoms started. Sarah woke drenched in sweat, her skin too tight, her omega instinct screaming for something she'd never felt before. She stumbled to the bathroom and splashed cold water on her face, but it didn't help. Her body felt like it was burning from the inside out. She made it back to bed and curled into a ball, biting her lip to keep from crying out. The bond mark on her wrist burned silver. She didn't know how long she lay there, minutes or hours, before she heard the barn door slam open. Footsteps crossed the yard at a run. Then Cale was at her bedroom door, not entering, never entering, but his presence was like a wave of cool relief washing over her. Sarah? His voice was strained. Talk to me. I'm fine, she managed, but her voice shook. You're not fine. I can feel it through the bond, you're in pain. A pause. This is a heat. Early. The bond triggered it. That's not possible. Sarah knew omega biology. Heats came on predictable cycles, usually twice a year. She wasn't due for another 4 months. Partial bonds can trigger early heats if the connection is strong enough. Your omega instincts think you found a mate, and they're trying to. Cale trailed off. They're trying to complete the bond. Sarah's stomach dropped. How long will it last? 3 to 5 days, normally. But without, he stopped again, and Sarah could practically hear him choosing his words carefully. Without completing the mating bond, it could get worse. Dangerous, even. Dangerous how? Omegas in incomplete bonds sometimes develop fevers that don't break. Dehydration. Seizures. Cale's voice had gone flat, clinical. I've only read about it in old texts. It's rare, but possible. Sarah closed her eyes. Of course. Of course this was happening. She'd survived poison only to be killed by her own biology. There's another option, Cale said quietly. She knew what he was going to say before he said it. We complete the bond. I claim you properly as my mate, and the heat will stabilize. He was silent for a beat. But I won't do that without your genuine consent, Sarah. I won't become the monster everyone thinks I am. And if I refuse? Then I'll do everything I can to keep you alive through the heat. Cold compresses, fluids, medication if I can get it. You might survive. You might not. Sarah's whole body was shaking now, part heat and part something else. That's not much of a choice. I know. Cale's voice was raw. I know, and I'm sorry. This is my fault for giving you my blood, for creating this bond. If I could take it back. Would you? Sarah interrupted. Let me die instead? Long silence. No, Cale admitted. No, I'd do it again. Every time. Something about the honesty in his voice made Sarah's chest ache. She opened her mouth to respond, to say what, she didn't know, when she heard a sound that made them both freeze. Hoofbeats. Coming up the mountain path at speed. Cale swore viciously and left her doorway. Sarah heard him cross the cabin, heard the front door open. Voices carried through the open window, Cale's deep rumble and someone else, official and cold. Cale Thornridge, by order of the High Council, you are commanded to appear in the capital in 3 days' time. Sarah forced herself out of bed, clutching the doorframe for support. Through the window, she could see a messenger in council livery, holding a scroll sealed with red wax. On what grounds? Cale asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Councilman Varro has filed a formal complaint. You are accused of kidnapping an unmated Omega from the gathering, one Sarah Winters of the Willowbrook Pack. The messenger's expression was studiously neutral. The Omega is to be returned to the capital for testimony regarding the incident. Sarah's blood turned to ice. Varro. This was Varro's doing. She's not kidnapped, Cale said. She's here of her own free will. Then she can testify to that effect. You have 3 days to present yourselves to the council, or you will be declared rogue and subject to immediate execution. Those are the terms. The messenger thrust the scroll at Cale. Choose wisely, Thornridge. The messenger rode off, leaving Cale standing in the yard with the scroll clenched in one massive fist. Sarah stumbled onto the porch. Cale turned, and the look on his face made her Omega instincts whimper. He's covering up the poisoning, she said. If I go back there, Varro will kill me to keep me quiet. I know. But if you don't return me, the council will execute you for kidnapping. I know that too. Cale looked down at the scroll, then back at Sarah. We have 3 days to figure this out. There's nothing to figure out. Either you die or I die. Sarah's laugh was bordering on hysterical. Those are great options. There's always a third option. Which is? Cale's silver eyes met hers, and for the first time since she'd woken in his cabin, she saw something dangerous flicker in their depths. Something that reminded her exactly why they called him the Monster Alpha. We fight, he said simply. Both of us. Together. A hot flash rolled through Sarah, strong enough to make her knees buckle. Cale caught her before she could fall, his first time touching her since that night in the forest, and the contact was like lightning and relief all at once. But first, he said, lifting her easily in his arms and carrying her back inside, we keep you alive through this heat. Everything else comes after. Sarah pressed her face against his chest, breathing in his scent, and felt the bond mark burn bright enough to light the darkening room. 3 days. A forced heat. A murder attempt to cover up. And a monster who'd just promised to fight the entire council if that's what it took to keep her safe. Sarah had wanted her life to begin at the gathering. She just hadn't expected it to begin quite like this, trapped in a cabin with the most dangerous alpha in the territory, bound by silver marks and impossible choices, with a councilman who wanted her dead and a body that was trying to claim a mate she'd been taught to fear. The heat pulsed through her again, and Cale's arms tightened. I've got you, he murmured against her hair. I promise, Sarah. I've got you. And despite everything, the danger, the bond, the impossible situation, Sarah found herself believing him. Wanting to see what would happen next, subscribe to this channel to get to listen to more of our upcoming exciting stories. Click on the subscribe button now. Thank you. Chapter 3. The heat came in waves that had no mercy. Sarah lost track of time somewhere around hour 6. The cabin walls blurred. Her skin felt like it was trying to crawl off her bones. Every nerve ending screamed for something she'd never experienced but her Omega biology recognized with devastating clarity. Mate. Need mate. Need alpha. Through the bond, she could feel Cale in the barn. His presence was a beacon in her fevered mind, close enough to sense, far enough to be agony. And beneath his carefully controlled surface, she felt his own suffering. The alpha instincts he was fighting with every ounce of his considerable will. He was in as much pain as she was. Maybe more. The realization cut through another wave of heat. Cale was torturing himself out there, denying the most fundamental drive of his nature, all because he'd promised not to touch her without genuine consent. Most alphas would have claimed her by now. Would have justified it as mercy, as necessity, as helping an Omega through her heat. The stories were full of alphas who couldn't help themselves when faced with an Omega's scent. But Cale Thornridge, the monster alpha, the wolf who'd killed his own kind, he sat alone in a barn and suffered because she was afraid. Sarah tried to stand. Her legs gave out. She crawled instead, every movement feeling like pushing through honey. The floor was cool against her overheated skin. The front door seemed a mile away. She made it to the porch as another wave hit, this one strong enough to pull a cry from her throat. In the barn, something crashed. Heavy footsteps. Then silence, like Cale had forced himself still through sheer force of will. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered to the empty air, not sure if she was apologizing to him or herself. "I'm so sorry." The bond pulsed. She felt his response like a physical touch. "Don't apologize, you have nothing to be sorry for, this isn't your fault." Another wave. Sarah pressed her face against the porch boards and tried to breathe. She must have passed out. When she came to, the sun had moved. Late afternoon, maybe. Or early evening. The heat had backed off to a simmer instead of a boil, giving her a window of clarity that she knew wouldn't last. Sarah dragged herself upright. The barn door was closed, but golden light leaked through the cracks. She could hear movement inside, pacing, restless and endless. She should go back inside the cabin. Wait it out. Let Cale maintain his distance and his honor and his careful control. But the bond thrummed between them, and Sarah was so tired of being afraid. Tired of letting other people make choices for her. Tired of surviving instead of living. Margaret had told her to stay invisible. Vero had poisoned her for being in his way. The whole world had spent 22 years teaching her that she didn't matter, that her choices didn't count, that Omegas like her were meant to be seen and not heard. Cale had given her the first real choice of her life, stay or go. Fight or flee. Claim him or walk away. Sarah chose. She crossed the yard on shaking legs. Her hand on the barn door felt like the bravest thing she'd ever done. "Cale?" Her voice cracked. "I'm coming in." Silence. "Then, don't." "Sarah, please don't." She opened the door anyway. The barn was simple, hay bales, a workbench, tools hung on the walls. And Cale, standing in the center of it all like a caged animal. He'd torn his shirt off at some point. Sweat gleamed on his skin. His eyes had gone more wolf than man, silver bleeding into gold. He looked at her, and Sarah watched him fight for control. Watched his hands clench into fists. Watched every muscle in his massive frame lock tight. "You need to leave," he said, and his voice had dropped an octave, rough as gravel. "Right now, Sarah. Before you what?" She took a step inside. The bond hummed with recognition, with rightness. "Before you claim your mate? You're not." Cale's breath hitched. "You don't know what you're saying. The heat's talking, not you." "The heat gave me clarity." Sarah took another step. She could feel his alpha presence like a physical force, pressing against her Omega instincts, and instead of fear, she felt safe. "I'm choosing you, Cale. Not because of the bond. Not because I'm dying. Because in 5 days, you've been kinder to me than anyone's been in 5 years. I'm a killer." His voice broke. "Everyone knows what I am. You're a man who fixed my glasses. Who brings me flowers. Who's standing in a barn suffering because you'd rather die than force me into something I don't want." Sarah's eyes stung. "You're not a monster. You're the first person who ever gave me a choice." She closed the distance between them. Even with the heat scrambling her thoughts, she knew this was real. Knew this was right in a way that had nothing to do with biology and everything to do with the careful way he'd treated her since that first night. Sarah. Her name on his lips sounded like a prayer and a warning. "If we do this, there's no going back. You'll be mine. I'll be yours. The council will call you outcast for mating in exile. Your family. My family sold me out. The words tasted bitter but true. And I don't care what the council calls me. I care about surviving. And I care about you, which is insane because I barely know you, but I do. I feel you through this bond. I know you're good. Cale stared at her. His control was fracturing. She could see it in the way his chest heaved, the way his hands shook with the effort of not reaching for her. Are you sure? He asked, and the vulnerability in his voice broke something in her chest. Sarah, are you absolutely sure? I'm sure. She reached up, had to reach up so far, he was so much taller, and touched his face. His skin was burning. Claim me, Cale. Please. The please did it. His control shattered like glass. Cale caught her in his arms, lifting her like she weighed nothing, and his mouth found hers with devastating precision. The kiss was everything and too much and not nearly enough. His scent surrounded her, pine and storms and wild things, and her omega instinct sang with triumph. Yes. This. Him. Ours. Gentle, he muttered against her lips, even as his hands trembled. Have to be gentle. Don't want to hurt you. You won't. Sarah kissed him again, pulling him down to her. I trust you. Those 3 words seemed to undo him completely. What happened next was intense and transformative and surprisingly tender. Cale was impossibly careful despite his size, despite the alpha instincts that must have been roaring through him. His hands were reverent. His voice, rough and low, kept asking if she was okay, if this was good, if she needed him to stop. Sarah had been taught that mating was something that happened to omegas. Something they endured. But this, Cale's careful strength, his obvious restraint, the way he watched her face like she was something precious, this was something they did together. A choice they both made. A bond they both claimed. When he finally marked her, his teeth at her throat, the ancient seal of a mating bond, the pain was brief and bright. Then his alpha healing washed through her like cool water, and the heat that had been trying to kill her simply stopped. The silver scars on their wrists blazed. Then, impossibly, they shifted. Turned molten. Became gold. True mate marks. Not partial, not temporary. Permanent. Cale pulled back enough to look at his wrist, then at hers. His expression was somewhere between awe and terror. That's not supposed to happen, he said roughly. Chosen bonds don't turn gold. Only fated mate bonds. We're fated mates? Sarah could barely process the words. Fated mates were rare, 1 in 1,000 pairings. The stuff of legends. Apparently. Cale's hand was shaking as he traced the gold mark on her wrist. I didn't know. I swear to you, Sarah, I didn't know. When I saved you that night, I wasn't trying to. I know. She caught his hand, laced their fingers together. The gold marks aligned perfectly, 2 halves of one whole. I know you weren't. They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in hay and twilight and the stunning reality of what they'd just done. Then Cale's expression darkened. I need to tell you something. About my exile. About why Vero really wants me dead. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Okay. The alpha I killed during that dominance fight, his name was Marcus Vero. The councilman's younger brother. Cale's voice was flat, reciting facts that still hurt. Marcus was cruel. Challenged me during a territorial dispute, when I was 19 and didn't fully understand my own strength. I tried to submit. Tried to back down. But he kept pushing, kept demanding dominance, and I. You defended yourself. I killed him. In front of 24 witnesses. Cale's jaw clenched. The council ruled it a legal dominance fight. Self-defense. But Vero spent 7 years looking for an excuse to execute me anyway. The poisoning, the kidnapping accusation, it's all a trap, Sarah. He used you as bait to draw me out of my territory where he can legally kill me. The words settled like stones. So going to the capital for testimony would be suicide. Varro's probably already convinced half the council I'm guilty. And now that we're mated. Kale looked at her, and his expression was raw. Now he has even more ammunition. I claimed an unmated Omega who was supposedly my kidnapping victim. It looks like I forced you. But you didn't. I chose this. Your word against a councilman's, and I'm already exiled. Who do you think they'll believe? Kale stood, pulling her up with him. I've made you an outcast, Sarah. By mating me, you're exiled too. No pack will take you. The council will call you complicit in your own kidnapping. And if Varro gets his way, you'll die alongside me as proof of his justice. Sarah's mind was racing. So we run. Take the money you offered, head north or west, find somewhere Varro's authority doesn't reach. He'll hunt us. Officially, legally, with the full backing of the council. There's nowhere in the territories we could hide. Kale's voice was bitter. I've doomed you. You chose me, and I've doomed you. Stop that. Sarah grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. I made my choice with full knowledge that it would be hard. You told me everything except the part about Varro's brother, and honestly? That doesn't change anything. You defended yourself. Marcus forced the fight. The council doesn't care. Then we make them care. Sarah was surprised by the steel in her own voice. You said there's always a third option. We fight, remember? Kale looked at her like she'd grown a second head. Fight the council? Sarah, that's... The sound of hoofbeats cut him off. They both froze. It was full dark now, and nobody should be riding up the mountain at this hour. Kale moved to the barn door, positioning himself between Sarah and whatever was coming. A single rider emerged from the tree line. Even in the darkness, Sarah recognized the rigid posture, the expensive riding clothes. Margaret. No, Sarah breathed. Kale's hand found hers, squeezing once. Then he stepped outside, Sarah following close behind. Margaret dismounted with practiced ease. Her eyes swept over them, Kale's shirtless state, Sarah's disheveled appearance, the way they stood together, and her expression twisted with something that might have been satisfaction. So it's true, Margaret said. The monster Alpha did claim you. Varro will be pleased. What are you doing here? Sarah's voice shook with anger. How did you even find this place? I've known where Thornridge lives for months. Varro's people have been watching him. Margaret's smile was cold. Did you think your attendance at the gathering was coincidence, Sarah? That I suddenly decided to bring my worthless stepdaughter to the most important mate-seeking event of the year? The bottom dropped out of Sarah's stomach. You knew. You knew what Varro was going to do. I knew he wanted leverage against Thornridge. Bait, essentially. A way to draw the monster out. Margaret shrugged. You were convenient. An unmated Omega nobody would miss. Varro promised me a seat on the local pack council if I delivered you to the gathering and made sure you caught Thornridge's attention. You sold me out. Sarah could barely get the words out. For a council seat. You let Varro poison me. I didn't know about the poison, Margaret said, and had the audacity to sound annoyed. That was his improvisation. Sloppy, really. But effective, as it turns out. You led us right to him. Kale growled, a sound that came from deep in his chest and made the trees seem to lean away. Get off my land. Now. Oh, I'm going. I just wanted to see for myself before I report back. Margaret's eyes glinted. Varro's bringing a hunting party. 20 of his best fighters, all council sanctioned. They'll be here by dawn. She mounted her horse. I'd tell you to run, but there's really no point. You're both dead. She rode off before either of them could respond, her horse's hoofbeats fading into the night. Sarah felt numb. Her own stepmother, the woman who'd raised her after her father died, who'd fed and sheltered her even if it was never with kindness, had sold her to a councilman as bait in a political murder. Sarah. Cale's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. Look at me. She did. His eyes were blazing gold, his alpha presence like a wall of protective fury. 20 fighters by dawn, he said. That gives us maybe 6 hours. Not enough time to run, but enough to prepare. His hand tightened on hers. I need to know right now, are you with me? All the way? Because what I'm about to do will either save us or get us both killed, and I won't make that choice for you. Sarah looked at their joined hands. At the gold marks that proclaimed them true mates, fated and claimed and bound together. She'd spent her whole life being invisible, being used, being afraid. She was done with that. I'm with you, she said. What's the plan? Cale's smile was all teeth. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked like the monster everyone claimed he was. We give them exactly what they came for, he said. A fight they'll never forget. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 4. Dawn was still 2 hours away when Cale started packing supplies with methodical precision. You're not seriously considering surrender, Sarah said, watching him from the doorway. She'd felt his thoughts through the bond, the grim resignation, the careful calculations of how to keep her safe even if it meant his death. It's the only way to keep you alive. Cale didn't look at her. I'll tell the council I forced the bond. Kidnapped you, marked you against your will. They'll execute me, but you'll be treated as a victim. Given sanctuary, maybe even compensation. No. Sarah. No. She crossed the room and grabbed his arm, forcing him to face her. You're not doing this. I won't let you. You don't have a choice. His voice was raw. I've already lost everything, my territory, my reputation, my place in society. But you're 22 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. I won't let Vero take that because I was selfish enough to save you. Selfish? Sarah's laugh was sharp. You gave me choice. You gave me respect. You gave me more in 5 days than I've had in 5 years. That's not selfish, Cale. That's the first real thing anyone's ever given me. And I'm about to take it all away. Only if we let them. Sarah's mind was racing, pieces clicking together. The stories Cale had told her during their training sessions. The careful way he'd explained council politics, dominance displays, the unwritten rules that govern pack society. You said there's always a third option. That we fight. Against 20 trained fighters and a corrupt council? Sarah, that's suicide. Maybe. Or maybe we're thinking about this wrong. She pulled away, pacing. Vero wants us to run or surrender. He's prepared for both. But what if we do neither? What if we go to the capital, not as fugitives, but as accusers? Cale stared at her. You want to accuse a councilman? In front of the entire council? I want to expose him. Sarah's voice was gaining strength. Vero poisoned me. That's attempted murder. And I'm willing to bet I'm not his first victim. Men like him don't start with poison, they work up to it. Something flickered in Cale's expression. Not hope, not yet, but something close to it. You'd need evidence. Witnesses. Omega's willing to testify against a councilman, which is dangerous. I know. Sarah met his eyes. But I'm not the sheltered girl who came to the gathering anymore. You trained me. You taught me how to be strong. Now let me use it. Cale was quiet for a long moment. Then, my sister. Lyra. She's a pack doctor in the capital. We haven't spoken since my exile, but she stayed in contact secretly. Sent letters. He pulled out a small wooden box from under the bed. Inside were dozens of letters, all in the same flowing script. She works with Omegas. If anyone would know about other victims, it's her. Then we start there. Sarah's heart was pounding. This was insane. This was probably going to get them both killed. But sitting here waiting for execution was certain death. At least this way, they'd go down fighting. We have 6 hours before Vero's hunting party arrives. That's enough time to get a head start toward the capital. Sarah. Cale caught her face in his hands, his touch impossibly gentle. If we do this, there's no turning back. We'll be walking into the council's territory with a target on our backs. Vero will do everything in his power to stop us. I know. She covered his hands with hers. But we're fated mates. The bond turned gold. That has to mean something. That has to be worth fighting for. The gold marks on their wrists pulsed in unison, as if responding to her words. Cale's expression shifted, resignation giving way to something fiercer. Then we fight. Together. They rode hard through the pre-dawn darkness, Cale's massive black horse carrying them both. Sarah had never been a strong rider, but pressed against Cale's back with his arm locked around her waist, she felt safe even at breakneck speed. The bond hummed between them, a constant thread of connection. She could feel his determination, his lingering fear for her safety, his growing hope that maybe, just maybe, this could work. 3 hours into their journey, Cale pulled up short. What is it? Sarah whispered. We're being followed. His voice was grim. 2 riders. Maybe 3. Staying just out of sight. Vero's people? Probably. Cale urged the horse forward again, but slower now. They're not attacking yet. Just tracking us. Why would they track instead of attack? Because Vero wants to know where we're going. Who we're meeting with. Cale's jaw tightened. If we lead them to Lyra, she'll be compromised. If we lead them to any other Omegas willing to testify, they'll be silenced. Sarah's stomach turned. So we need to lose them. Or face them. Cale's hand moved to the knife at his belt. 3 against 1 aren't terrible odds. 3 against 2, Sarah corrected. I can fight. Sarah. You taught me, remember? I'm not helpless anymore. She pulled out the small blade Cale had given her during training. It wasn't much, but she knew how to use it. Besides, the bond makes us stronger together. You said so yourself. Cale was silent for a moment. Then he changed direction, guiding the horse off the main path into denser forest. There's a clearing ahead. Defensible position. We'll make our stand there. The clearing was small, backed by a rock face that protected their rear. Cale dismounted and helped Sarah down, his movements calm and efficient despite the danger. Stay behind me, he said. If things go badly. They won't. Sarah touched the gold mark on her wrist. We're fated mates, Cale. That means we're supposed to survive this. His smile was brief but genuine. I hope you're right. The attackers emerged from the trees 3 minutes later. Not 3 riders, 5. All armed, all wearing the dark leather of professional enforcers. Cale Thornridge, the lead enforcer, called out. By order of Councilman Vero, you are to surrender the Omega and submit to judgment. The Omega has a name, Sarah called before Cale could respond. It's Sarah. And I'm not being surrendered to anyone. The enforcer's eyes flicked to her, then back to Cale. The councilman said you might resist. He's authorized us to use necessary force. Necessary force. Cale's voice had dropped to that dangerous rumble. That's what you call murder now? That's what we call justice. The first enforcer lunged. What happened next was brutal and efficient. Cale moved like violence made flesh, every strike precise, every movement calculated. He'd been holding back during their training sessions, Sarah realized. This was what he really was, a weapon honed by years of surviving in a world that wanted him dead. 2 enforcers went down in seconds. The third managed to get behind Kale, blade aimed for his spine. Sarah didn't think. She moved, her own knife flashing. The enforcer screamed as her blade caught his arm, the strike exactly where Kale had taught her, inside of the elbow, where tendons were vulnerable. The enforcer stumbled. Kale finished him with a single blow. The last 2 enforcers hesitated, reassessing. They'd been told to expect a rogue alpha and a helpless omega. They clearly hadn't prepared for what they were facing. "Leave," Kale said, his voice carrying absolute authority. "Tell Vero we're coming for him. Tell him we're bringing evidence of every omega he's hurt. And tell him that if he wants to stop us, he'll have to do better than sending dogs to do his work." The enforcers ran. Sarah's hands were shaking. She'd just stabbed someone. Actually put a blade into flesh and drawn blood. The reality of it hit her in a wave of nausea. "Hey." Kale was there, taking the knife gently from her grip. "You did good. You protected your mate. That's alpha-level instinct in an omega body. You should be proud." "I don't feel proud. I feel sick." "That means you're still human." He pulled her against his chest, and the bond hummed with comfort. "The day violence stops bothering you is the day you become what they accuse me of being. But today? Today you were strong." Sarah pressed her face against him and let herself shake for exactly 30 seconds. Then she pulled back, squared her shoulders, and nodded. "Okay. Let's keep moving. We have a councilman to destroy." Lyra Thornridge lived in a modest house on the edge of the capital's Omega district. She answered the door with a knife in one hand and suspicion in her eyes, until she saw Kale. "Brother." Her voice cracked. "They said you'd been accused of kidnapping." "It's a lie. All of it." Kale gestured to Sarah. "This is Sarah. My mate. Lyra, we need your help." Lyra's eyes dropped to their wrists, to the gold mate marks that couldn't be faked. Her expression shifted from suspicion to wonder. "Fated mates. Kale, do you know how rare?" "I know. Can we come in? We don't have much time." Inside, over tea that none of them drank, they explained everything. The poisoning. The accusation. Margaret's betrayal. Vero's hunting party. Lyra listened with a doctor's calm, but Sarah could see the fury building behind her eyes. "Vero," she said when they finished. "I've suspected him for years. 3 Omegas have died under suspicious circumstances after public interactions with him. All ruled accidents or natural causes. But the symptoms," she pulled out a medical journal, flipping to marked pages. "Consistent with wolfsbane poisoning. Low doses, administered over time." "Can you prove it?" Sarah asked. "Not without exhuming bodies, which the council would never allow." Lyra's jaw tightened. "But I know 2 Omegas who survived his accidents. They're terrified, scarred, but alive. If you could convince them to testify." "We'll convince them," Sarah said with more confidence than she felt. "Where do we find them?" It took 2 days to gather the testimonies. 2 Omegas willing to speak, their stories eerily similar to Sarah's. Public embarrassment of Councilman Vero, followed by mysterious illness, followed by threats to stay silent. "He told me nobody would believe an Omega over a councilman," one of them said, a small woman named Alara. "He said I was lucky to be alive, and I should be grateful." "He's right that nobody would believe us individually," Sarah said. "But together? 3 victims with identical stories? That's a pattern. That's evidence." "The council won't care," the other Omega, Marcus, said bitterly. "They protect their own. Then we make them care." Sarah looked at Kale. "Your exile was ruled legal, right? Self-defense in a dominance fight?" "Yes, but..." "So you have legal standing. You can call for a formal hearing." It's your right as an exiled alpha to petition for case review. Sarah was working through the laws Kale had taught her. We use that as our entry point. Once we're in front of the council, we present everything. The poisoning, the pattern, the testimonies. Vero will block it, Lyra said. He has allies. Favors owed. Probably. But he'll have to do it publicly, in front of the entire council. And if he fights too hard to prevent testimony about his crimes. Sarah smiled grimly. That looks like guilt. Kale stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. You've been thinking about this. I've been thinking about survival. Which means thinking 3 moves ahead, just like you taught me. She touched his hand. Can you request the hearing? Yes. It's risky, but yes. Then that's what we do. The journey to the council hall took another day. They traveled with Lyra and the 2 Omega witnesses, a small group that felt impossibly fragile against the weight of what they were attempting. The ambush came 5 miles from the capital. Sarah saw the glint of steel half a second before Kale moved, his body slamming into hers, taking them both to the ground as arrows whistled overhead. Assassins, Kale growled. At least 8. Professional. Through the bond, Sarah felt his battle calculations, odds, angles, weak points. And beneath it all, his absolute terror for her safety. I can fight, she said. Not against 8 assassins. An arrow thudded into the tree beside them. Kale roared, and the sound was nothing human. His alpha presence exploded outward, a wave of dominance that made even Sarah's Omega instincts want to submit. What followed was carnage. Kale moved like the monster everyone feared, every strike lethal, his size and strength overwhelming. But Sarah saw the truth of it now. This wasn't mindless violence. This was precision. Protection. A mate defending his bond with everything he had. When one assassin got past Kale's guard and lunged for Sarah, she was ready. Her knife found his throat, not a killing blow, but enough to make him stumble. Kale finished him. The survivors fled. Kale turned to Sarah, breathing hard, covered in blood that wasn't his. Are you hurt? No. You? No. He pulled her against him, and through the bond, she felt his love like a physical force. You fought like a wolf. Like a true alpha's mate. I had a good teacher. They made it to the council hall by sunset. The building was massive, all white marble and authority, designed to make visitors feel small. Sarah refused to feel small. They were announced formally, Kale Thornridge, petitioning for case review. Sarah Thornridge, his bonded mate. The witnesses following behind. The council chamber was circular, with 7 counselors seated in a semicircle. Vero sat in the position of honor, and when his eyes landed on Sarah, she saw murder in them. This hearing is highly irregular, Vero said smoothly. The exile of Kale Thornridge was settled 7 years ago. There are no grounds for review. There are when new evidence suggests council corruption, Kale said, his voice carrying through the chamber. I petition under the right of truth. Any accused may speak if they bring witnesses and evidence. The head counselor, an ancient alpha named Gregor, stroked his beard. The right of truth hasn't been invoked in 30 years. But it is law. What evidence do you bring? Testimony of attempted murder by a sitting counselor, Sarah said before Vero could object. 3 Omegas poisoned by Councilman Vero after minor social infractions. I am the 4th. The chamber erupted in murmurs. Vero's face had gone pale, then red. This is absurd, he said. These are lies from an exile and his bond-addled mate. Then let the witnesses speak, Gregor interrupted. If these are lies, testimony will reveal it. Elara spoke first, her voice shaking but clear. Then Marcus. Then Sarah, recounting the wine spill, the champagne that tasted wrong, the poison that had nearly killed her. And you have proof of this poisoning? Vero asked with false sympathy. Medical evidence? Or just the word of Omegas seeking attention? I have my Alpha's blood bond, Sarah said. His blood neutralized the wolfsbane. That's documented in every medical text. Alpha blood only reacts that way to specific poisons. Alpha blood bonds are inadmissible as evidence, Vero said, and his smile was triumphant. According to council law, Section 7, Subsection 3, any alpha who forms a blood bond with an omega without explicit prior permission has committed an act equivalent to forced marking. And testimony from an omega in a forced bond is inadmissible because she is bond-addled, unable to think clearly due to the bond's influence on her judgment. The words hit like a physical blow. Sarah felt Kale's horror through the bond. That's not, Kale started. It's law, Vero interrupted. Ancient law, yes, but never repealed. The Omega's testimony is worthless. As are your witnesses, who are clearly connected to her through this conspiracy. He stood, addressing Gregor directly. Counselor, I move for immediate execution. Kale Thornridge has violated an Omega through forced bonding. The penalty is death. Gregor looked troubled, but he nodded slowly. The law is clear. Guards. No. Sarah lunged forward as guards moved toward Kale. He didn't force anything. I chose him. The bond is real, it's faded, look at the marks. But nobody was listening. The guards had Kale in chains, special chains, reinforced silver that burned against his skin. He didn't fight. Didn't resist. Because fighting would only make things worse for Sarah. Through the bond, she felt his resignation. His grief. His love. Sarah, he said as they dragged him toward the execution chamber. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. No. Sarah was screaming now, fighting against the hands that held her. You can't do this. He saved my life. The bond is real. Vero approached her, his smile cold. Perhaps you'll learn, little Omega. Council law exists for a reason. And nobody, not even fated mates, stands against the council and survives. Sarah watched them drag her mate away, felt his pain through the bond like knives in her chest, and realized they'd walked straight into Vero's trap. He'd known about the ancient law. Had probably been waiting years to use it. And now Kale was going to die because he'd saved her life, because he'd given her a choice, because he'd been kind when the world demanded cruelty. Sarah stopped struggling. The guards relaxed slightly, thinking she'd given up. They were wrong. She wasn't the frightened girl from the gathering anymore. She was Kale Thornridge's mate. And she would be damned before she let them kill him without a fight. If you're still listening to this story up to this point, why don't you subscribe to this channel to continue getting impactful daily stories like this? We would be most grateful if you can do that to help boost this video to reach everyone. Thank you. Chapter 5. The holding cell was small, cold, and designed to break spirits. Sarah paced its length, 7 steps wall to wall, while guards watched from outside. Through the bond, she could feel Kale in the execution chamber. His calm. His acceptance. His overwhelming love for her even as he prepared to die. She wanted to scream. To tear the bars apart with her bare hands. To burn the entire council hall to the ground. Instead, she forced herself to think. Vero had used an ancient law against them. Section 7, Subsection 3, blood bonds formed without prior permission were considered forced, and Omega testimony was inadmissible because of bond influence. But laws had exceptions. They always did. Kale had taught her that during their training, every rule had a loophole, every tradition had a counter-tradition. You just had to know where to look. Sarah closed her eyes and pulled up every conversation, every lesson, every story Kale had told her about council law and pact traditions. Something about Omega testimony. Something about proving choice. Something about... Her eyes snapped open. The right of challenge. It was ancient, rarely used, supposedly dangerous as hell. An Omega could stake her life on her mate's honor by invoking divine judgment. If she spoke truth, the moon goddess would mark her with proof visible to all. If she lied, the magic would kill her. Most Omegas never attempted it. The ritual required drinking a tincture of wolfsbane, the same poison that had nearly killed Sarah once already. The Omega had to trust absolutely that her bond was strong enough, true enough, to survive the goddess's test. Sarah had survived wolfsbane once because of Kale's blood. Because their bond was real. She could survive it again. "Guard," she called out. Her voice was steady. "I invoke the right of challenge under ancient pack law. I demand to testify before the full council with the moon goddess as my witness." The guard blinked at her. "What?" "The right of challenge. It's my right as a bonded Omega to prove my mate's honor through divine judgment." Sarah met his eyes. "If you deny me this, you violate sacred law. And the council will have your head for it." The guard's face went pale. He muttered something to his companion and hurried off. 10 minutes later, they dragged her, not gently, back to the council chamber. The room fell silent when she entered. All 7 counselors were present now, summoned by the invocation. Even Varro, though his expression was thunderous. Gregor leaned forward. "You invoke the right of challenge? Do you understand what that means?" "Yes." Sarah's voice carried through the chamber. "I will speak truth before the goddess and prove that my bond with Kale Thornridge was freely chosen. If I lie, I die. If I speak truth, the goddess will mark me with proof." "This is absurd," Varro said. "The right hasn't been used in over a century." "But it is law," another counselor interrupted, a woman named Helena, who'd been watching the proceedings with sharp interest. "Ancient law, like the one you invoked, Varro. If the Omega requests the right, we must allow it." Varro's jaw clenched, but he nodded stiffly. "Bring the prisoner," Gregor commanded. They brought Kale in chains. His eyes found Sarah immediately, and through the bond, she felt his horror. "No. Sarah, no. Don't do this. I have to. Trust me. You could die. Then we die together. But we won't. I know we won't." A priestess was summoned, ancient, draped in silver robes, carrying a ceremonial cup. She placed it on the table before Sarah with trembling hands. "The rite is simple," Gregor explained. "You will drink the tincture of wolfsbane. You will speak your truth. The goddess will judge. If your bond is pure and your words honest, you will survive and bear her mark. If you lie..." He didn't finish. He didn't have to. Sarah looked at the cup. The liquid inside was dark purple, and she could smell the bitter tang of wolfsbane even from 3 feet away. "Before I drink," she said, "I want everyone here to understand what I'm proving. The law Councilman Varro cited says Omega testimony is inadmissible if the bond was forced. But my bond wasn't forced. I chose Kale Thornridge as my mate freely, with full knowledge and clear mind." "You were dying of poison," Varro interrupted. "Hardly a clear mind." "I was dying of your poison," Sarah shot back. "The poison you put in my champagne after I spilled wine on your expensive suit. And yes, Kale saved me that night with his blood. But I didn't choose him then. I chose him 4 days later, when I was clear-headed and healed and fully aware of what it would mean." She held up her wrist, the gold mark gleaming. "These marks don't lie. We're fated mates. True mates. And I will prove it." She picked up the cup. Kale made a sound like a wounded animal. The chains rattled as he strained against them. "Sarah, please. I love you," she said, meeting his eyes. "And I trust our bond. I trust us." She drank. The wolfsbane hit her system like liquid fire. Sarah's legs gave out immediately. She collapsed to the floor, and through the bond, she felt Kale's agony as her pain became his pain. But she also felt his strength flowing into her. His alpha blood, still in her system from their mating, rising to fight the poison. The bond between them flared gold, visible to everyone in the chamber. Sarah forced words through the burning. I chose Cale Thornridge as my mate. I chose him for his kindness, for his strength, for the way he gave me choice when nobody else ever had. Her vision was darkening, but she kept talking. He is not a monster. He is not a killer. He is the best man I have ever known. And I would choose him, again and again, and again. The gold marks on her wrists began to glow. Not just glow, they blazed like miniature suns, bright enough to light the entire chamber. Then silver flames erupted from Sarah's skin. They didn't burn. Instead, they felt like cool water, like healing, like the moon goddess herself reaching down to touch mortal flesh. The flames spread from Sarah's marks across her body, writing truth in light. And where the flames touched Vero, standing too close, drawn by morbid fascination, his skin began to burn. He screamed. Black marks spread across his hands, his arms, his face. Not the silver of divine blessing, but the black of divine condemnation. The marks formed words in the old language, visible to every wolf present. Poisoner. Killer. Corrupt. No. Vero clawed at his skin, but the marks wouldn't fade. No, this is a trick. She's lying. But the moon goddess's judgment was absolute. Everyone in the chamber could see it, could feel the divine magic confirming Sarah's truth and exposing Vero's crimes. The silver flames around Sarah intensified. She gasped as the wolfsbane was purged from her system, the bond with Cale working exactly as she'd trusted it would. The poison burned away, leaving her whole. The flames faded. Sarah slumped forward, breathing hard but alive. And on her throat, visible to all, was a new mark, the silver crescent of the moon goddess's blessing. The mark that said this Omega speaks truth, and her bond is sacred. The chamber erupted in chaos. She lives. Helena was on her feet. The goddess has spoken. The Omega's testimony is valid. This proves nothing. Vero was backing away, still clawing at the black marks on his skin. She could have, the magic could be. The magic doesn't lie, Gregor said, his voice heavy. The right of challenge has spoken. Your crimes are written on your flesh for all to see, Vero. You poisoned this Omega. You used your position to cover attempted murder. You corrupted council law for personal vengeance. She deserved it. Vero's composure finally cracked. She humiliated me in front of everyone. And Thornridge, that monster killed my brother. He deserves to die. They both do. He lunged for Sarah, a knife appearing in his hand from God's new ware. Cale roared. The sound was nothing human, nothing civilized. It was pure alpha rage, a noise that made the walls shake and every wolf in the chamber bare their throats in instinctive submission. The chains holding Cale, reinforced silver, designed to hold the strongest alphas, shattered. He didn't break the locks or slip the restraints. He ripped the chains from the walls, stone crumbling beneath his strength, and moved faster than something his size should be able to move. Vero's knife was inches from Sarah's heart when Cale's hand closed around his wrist. No, Cale said, and his voice promised death. Vero screamed as bones broke. The knife clattered to the floor. Cale lifted him one-handed, held him suspended like a child's toy, and Sarah could see the murder in her mate's eyes. This was what everyone feared. This was the monster alpha, the killer, the wolf too dangerous to live among civilized society. But Sarah saw the truth. This was a mate protecting his bonded partner. This was love made fierce. This was what happened when you threatened what an alpha held most precious. Cale, she said softly. He didn't seem to hear her. His hand was around Vero's throat now, squeezing. Vero's face was turning purple. Cale. Sarah pushed herself to her feet, every muscle screaming in protest. She walked to her mate and placed her hand on his arm. Don't. He tried to kill you. Cale's voice was barely recognizable, Twice. He doesn't deserve to breathe. You're right. He doesn't. Sarah looked up at him, this massive, dangerous, gentle man who'd given her everything. But if you kill him, you become what they always said you were. A monster. A killer. Someone who can't control himself. I don't care what they think. But I do. She squeezed his arm. I care because you're not a monster. You're my mate. My protector. My love. And I don't want you to carry another death on your conscience. Especially not for him. He's not worth it. Cale's hand trembled. Through the bond, Sarah felt his internal war, the alpha instinct screaming for blood, the civilized man fighting for control. Slowly, painfully, he lowered Vero to the ground. The council will judge him, Sarah said, addressing Gregor while keeping her hand on Cale's arm. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Justice. Not vengeance. He's marked by the goddess herself. His crimes are proven. So do your job. Give him a fair trial and appropriate punishment. Gregor looked ashamed. You're right. Guards, take Vero into custody. He is charged with attempted murder, corruption of office, and conspiracy. He will be tried under council law. As they dragged a still screaming Vero away, Gregor turned to Cale. Your exile is overturned. The council was wrong to fear you, wrong to cast you out. You are welcome to return to society, to reclaim your territory. No, Cale said flatly. Gregor blinked. No. I don't want your society. I don't want my old territory. I don't want anything from the council that spent 7 years treating me like a monster. Cale's arm wrapped around Sarah, pulling her against his side. My mate and I will make our own way. But where will you go? Home. Cale looked down at Sarah. Back to the mountains. Where we can live without council politics or pack hierarchies or people who judge before they know. Actually, Sarah said, an idea forming, I think we should do more than just live there. Cale raised an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean we create something new. A sanctuary. Sarah looked at Lyra, who'd been watching from the gallery. For wolves who don't fit traditional pack structures. Exiled wolves, abused omegas, anyone who needs a place to heal and find their strength. We have the space. We have the skills. We could help people. Lyra stood, a smile spreading across her face. I'd come. I'd help. As a doctor, I could provide medical care. And I could teach combat, Cale added, catching on to Sarah's vision. Self-defense for omegas who've never been allowed to learn. Protection for those who've been told they're too weak to fight. This is highly irregular, Helena said, but she was smiling too. A sanctuary outside council jurisdiction. But not illegal, I suppose. If you maintain peace and don't threaten other territories. We don't threaten anyone, Sarah said firmly. We just offer choice. Safety. A place to become strong on your own terms. Gregor nodded slowly. Then you have the council's reluctant blessing. May your sanctuary thrive. 6 months later. Sarah stood on the porch of the expanded cabin, now more of a lodge, really, with additions built to house the 17 wolves who'd sought refuge in the past few months. The autumn air was crisp, the mountains ablaze with color. She pressed a hand to her slightly rounded belly and smiled. You're glowing. Lyra appeared beside her, medical bag in hand. Which, given what I'm about to confirm, makes perfect sense. You're sure? Sarah asked, though she already knew. The bond had told her 2 weeks ago, a subtle shift in the connection with Cale. A third presence, tiny but growing. Completely sure. You're about 10 weeks along. Lyra's expression turned clinical. Now, there's something you should know about the baby. Given Cale's genetics. Let me guess. Mega alpha genes? Lyra blinked. How did you? Kale told me it's a possibility. That his size isn't just because he's strong, it's a genetic variant. Extremely rare. Sarah looked down at her belly. So our child will probably be huge. Almost certainly. Which means you'll need specialized prenatal care, and we should prepare for a difficult delivery. Worth it, Sarah said immediately. I haven't even explained all the risks. Don't care. Worth it. Sarah grinned at Lyra's exasperated expression. I survived Wolfsbane twice, invoked divine judgment, and mated the monster alpha. I think I can handle pregnancy. You're impossible. I learned from the best. Kale emerged from the training yard, where he'd been teaching a group of young Omegas basic combat stances. Sweat gleamed on his skin despite the cool air. When he saw Sarah and Lyra together, his expression shifted to concern. Everything okay? Everything's perfect. Sarah walked to him, took his massive hand, and placed it on her belly. We're having a baby. Kale went absolutely still. Then a smile broke across his face, pure, unguarded joy that made him look 10 years younger. A baby, he breathed. We're having a baby? Probably a very large baby, Lyra added. Your genetics are dominant, Kale. This child will likely inherit your size, your strength. I hope they have your size and your heart, Sarah interrupted, looking up at her mate. All that strength, but gentle. Protective. Kind. Kale's eyes were bright with moisture. He cupped her face with infinite care. I hope they have your courage. Your fire. Your ability to see the truth in people everyone else calls monsters. He kissed her then, soft and reverent, and through the bonds Sarah felt his overwhelming love. For her. For their growing child. For the life they'd built from ashes and exile. Around them, the sanctuary buzzed with life. Voices called greetings. Someone was cooking dinner, the scent of roasting meat drifted from the kitchen. In the training yard, an Omega half Kale size successfully flipped her sparring partner and let out a victorious whoop. This was what they'd created. Not just a home, but a legacy. Sarah had come to the gathering 6 months ago as a sheltered, frightened girl who'd been taught she was worthless. She'd been poisoned, marked, exiled, and nearly executed. And through it all, she'd found the one thing nobody could have predicted: freedom. Choice. Love. The monster alpha had saved her life that night in the forest. But in the end, Sarah thought as she felt their child move for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings, they'd saved each other. What are you thinking? Kale asked, his hand still pressed to her belly. I'm thinking the stories got it wrong. You were never the monster. The real monsters were the ones who tried to make you believe you were. Kale's smile was beautiful. And you were never the helpless Omega they tried to convince you you were. No, Sarah agreed, watching the sun set over their mountain sanctuary. I was always this. I just needed someone to see it. Their child kicked again, stronger this time. Kale laughed, a sound of pure delight, and pulled Sarah close. In the distance, wolves howled at the rising moon. The sound carried across the mountains, a song of pack and family and belonging. But here, in the sanctuary they'd built, the howl meant something different. It meant choice. It meant safety. It meant that sometimes the monsters in the stories are just people who were never given a chance to be anything else. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you find someone who looks at your scars and sees strength. Who sees your fear and offers courage. Who sees your heart and calls it home. Sarah had found her monster in the woods. And he'd turned out to be her salvation. Thank you for watching this video. Subscribe, like and share this video to continue listening to this type of story daily and also, to appreciate this community too. I would like to hear your wonderful opinion about this story. Please comment below.